Maybe you have never watched this movie before, but these painful scenes are not unfamiliar to you. This story is based on a real incident from the series Chernobyl. The film shows the world-shaking nuclear disaster of 1986 in full detail. In the early morning of April 26, 1986, a loud explosion broke the silence of Chernobyl. The number 4 reactor of the nuclear power plant exploded. A strong blue light shot straight into the sky. After the accident, the Soviet government quickly started rescue operations. Firefighters received the emergency call and rushed to the site, but no one told them what had really happened. Everyone believed it was just a normal fire. With almost no protection, they went in to stop the fire, guided only by duty and instinct. When they carried highly radioactive graphite with their bare hands, within just a few minutes, the firefighters began to vomit. Some of them even lost consciousness. Even then, they did not step back. One after another, they kept running into the fire. On the other side, the deputy chief engineer of the power plant, Toptunov, knew very well that the reactor had exploded, but he chose to hide the truth and did not care about other people's lives. Meanwhile, the residents living near the power plant did not know the truth. They gathered on a bridge to watch the fire. They did not realize that behind those small flames was deadly radiation. The moving air carried radioactive dust toward the crowd. They were completely exposed to radiation strong enough to kill them. Later, this bridge became known to the world as the Bridge of Death. After this, a nuclear physics expert from Belarus, Ulana, steps forward to uncover the truth. Because of his professional experience, he sensed something unusual in the radiation and immediately started investigating. Soon after that, a large number of firefighters exposed to radiation were brought to the hospital. Their bodies showed severe damage and different levels of skin decay. Scientist Valery studied the injury reports and realized that the reactor core had most likely already exploded. The radiation level was far higher than what the officials were admitting. Valery then went to the site with Shachebina. With their own eyes, they witnessed how serious the nuclear power plant explosion really was and measured extremely high radiation levels. During the past 20 hours, the temperature inside the exploded reactor had already crossed 2,000 degrees. At this point, using water to cool it down would only make the situation worse. If the radioactive water seeped underground, it would heavily contaminate the main sources of drinking water. Realizing the seriousness of the situation, the Soviet government started a large-scale evacuation of civilians. To quickly stop the fire on the reactor, Valery suggested dropping sand and materials from helicopters. However, Uliana arrived and rejected this plan. She explained that the extreme heat would melt the sand into lava, and if this lava flowed into the water pool below, it could trigger an even bigger explosion. The only remaining option was to send power plant workers inside, drain the water, dig as fast as possible under the reactor, install a cooling system, and strengthen the protective layer. But the problem was that this area was the center of the nuclear leak. The intense radiation could kill anyone instantly. At that time, not even the highest leader of the Soviet Union had the authority to send people on such a suicide mission. Yet, the self-sacrifice of 3 brave men created a small hope in this disaster threatening all humanity. Even though the powerful radiation caused their equipment to fail instantly, it could not stop them from moving forward. Second by second, time passed, but there was no response from inside the reactor. The people waiting outside became extremely anxious. If even the experienced workers died inside, no one else would ever be able to approach the reactor, and all future plans would completely fail. Just when everyone had almost lost hope, a knocking sound came from inside. Seeing the 3 men successfully complete the mission, everyone finally breathed a sigh of relief. But the question remained, what would be the final fate of these heroes? The oxidizing gas separates the body cells. The cells start to glow and turn red and black. Soon, damage begins to appear in the cells. After that, the cells start dying. The immune system completely fails. The cells begin to separate from soft tissues. Even the lung cells start breaking apart. It happens like a magnetic chain reaction. At a certain point, the pain becomes so extreme that the human body can no longer tolerate it. Within 3 days to 3 weeks, the person will die. After all the water from the reservoir is drained, Valery discovers that the temperature at the reactor core is continuously rising. They must quickly send people to dig under the reactor and install a heat exchanger to reduce the temperature. This deadly life-risking mission is then given to the miners. I need all 100 men. Collect your equipment and get into the vehicle. Where are we going? To the most dangerous place. Come on, brothers, move out. We do not have enough protective equipment. Only a few may survive. Whoever stays alive will be able to stop this disaster. You cannot treat us like this. Shut up. "This is Tula. This is our factory. We will not leave unless we know the reason. We are going to Chernobyl. If the melted fuel sinks into the ground, it will flood almost all the water from the river to the Black Sea. All the water. They want you to stop this from happening. Although they are coal miners with rough, calloused hands, they are not afraid of any powerful authority. When they learn that sacrificing their own lives can save tens of thousands of people, they step forward without hesitation. They come from humble backgrounds, but at the most dangerous moment for the nation, they stand up bravely. Their bodies covered in coal dust become the brightest symbol of human courage and humanity. They stand in sharp contrast to the well-dressed coal minister, but in reality, the coal minister himself is the first one to lead the charge. Their mission is to dig a tunnel under the reactor in the shortest possible time. The tunnel must be 12 meters deep and 30 meters long and wide. A heat exchanger must be installed to reduce the temperature. No heavy machinery can be used during the process. All the work must be done by human hands alone. As the tunnel goes deeper, the temperature inside keeps rising. Even though they work naked, they cannot endure the 50-degree heat. The digging work becomes more difficult than anyone expected. This task was supposed to take 3 months to complete, but these ordinary coal mine workers, with strong willpower and non-stop hard work, finished a 3-month project in just 6 weeks. In the end, they successfully dug the tunnel, which allowed the cooling system to be installed properly and prevented a much more dangerous disaster from happening. However, this success came at a terrible cost. The workers inhaled a huge amount of radioactive dust. Because of this, at least several hundred people did not live beyond 40 years of age. Their effort and sacrifice saved countless lives and became an unforgettable legend in the history of the Chernobyl rescue mission. Even so, to completely eliminate the leaked nuclear radiation will take about 800 years, and the damage caused by radiation will last for 100,000 years. Before the collapse of the Soviet Union, around 775,000 Soviet citizens took part in this cleanup operation. Out of them, more than 100,000 people lost their lives. To prevent nuclear contamination from spreading and to protect nearby areas, all animals within a radius of 2,600 kilometers were killed, and all plants within 100 kilometers were destroyed. But cleaning the graphite debris caused by the explosion became the biggest challenge. Each piece of this graphite debris carried a deadly level of radiation, enough to kill a person within 1 hour. At first, people hoped to use robots for the cleanup. Robots were brought from Germany, Japan, and even robots designed by the Soviet Union for Mars exploration. But once they were sent in, it was discovered that the intense radiation destroyed their circuits almost instantly. All high-tech machines failed. As a result, 200 reserve soldiers were urgently called in and formed a suicide cleanup team. Before the mission, they hurriedly stitched their protective suits in a single night. The full equipment weighed about 30 kilograms. This was their only protection in this deadly mission. The soldiers were then sent to the roof in groups of 8 people. Each group was allowed to stay for no more than 90 seconds at a time. In this very short time, they had to use all their strength to push the graphite debris off the roof as fast as possible. No matter how much work was left, once the time was up, they had to retreat immediately, and another team would take their place. After continuous work day and night, all the scattered graphite debris was finally removed. At a time when no machines could function, these men achieved what seemed impossible and completed this deadly mission. Later, people learned that the radiation level on the roof had reached 1 millimeter per hour, far beyond what the human body can tolerate. Still, these young soldiers bought precious time to seal the reactor. They were the shining heroes of the dark chapter of Chernobyl. Their courage and sacrifice will forever be remembered in the history of humanity's fight against disasters. After the cleanup was completed, the real cause of the accident slowly came to light. Before the accident, Unit 4 of the reactor had an important safety test that was never fully completed. But in order to finish the project early, the plant director kept the reactor running at low power to continue supplying electricity. This test was meant for the RBMK-type reactor, to check whether, in a situation where external power was lost and the main cooling system failed, the steam turbine could support the emergency cooling water pumps. On the day of the 4th test, the engineers had already reduced the reactor power from 3,200 megawatts to 1,600 megawatts. But when they were about to lower the power further to the target level for the test, A sudden phone call came from the power company. They were asked to delay the power reduction until midnight. If Toptunov had cancelled the test at this moment, the disaster might never have happened. But what followed was even more shocking. Even though he knew that most of the night shift workers were trainees and were not fully familiar with the operation, Toptunov still decided to continue the test. Following Toptunov's orders, the workers suddenly reduced the power of reactor number 4, which was already at 1,600 megawatts. This sudden drop in power caused a dangerous chain reaction inside the reactor, and the power level began to fall rapidly. At the same time, the reactor core was poisoned by gas buildup and started losing its ability to work properly. As reactor number 4 was about to shut down completely, a senior engineer decided that the reactor should be stopped. However, Toptunov made a critical mistake. The workers could not disobey orders, so they continued the operation as instructed. To increase the power again, they pulled out a large number of control rods. Even worse, to prevent the automatic safety system from stopping the test, they turned off 21 important safety protection systems. Even after all this, the reactor power reached only 200 megawatts, which was far below the minimum power needed to complete the test. Still, Toptunov insisted on continuing. This single decision made the disaster impossible to stop. The reactor control rods began to shake violently. The water circulation system started to collapse and produced loud, terrifying noises. The reactor system issued emergency shutdown warnings, but Toptunov completely ignored them. Because so many control rods had been removed, the reactor power suddenly surged within just a few seconds. The workers rushed to the control room to tell everyone to stop the operation, but by then, the disaster could no longer be prevented. When the engineer pressed the emergency shutdown button, all indicator lights in the control room lit up at once. The reactor, which was designed for 3,200 megawatts, suddenly reached 33,000 megawatts. With a massive explosion, everything was lost. But this was not the full truth. At that time, no one knew that the emergency shutdown button, which was meant to save lives, would become the trigger of the disaster. The very system designed for emergency safety turned out to be the most critical cause of the entire accident. Just as Legasov was about to continue speaking, the government officials present there suddenly interrupted him. They tried to stop the meeting so that he could not tell the truth. At that moment, Shcherbina stepped forward. She was the highest-ranking official present there. To know the truth, she allowed Legasov to continue speaking. Then the real truth came out. The emergency shutdown system had a deadly flaw in its design. The control rods were supposed to be made of boron, because boron slows down nuclear reactions. But to reduce costs, the Soviet Union replaced the tips of the control rods with graphite. Graphite does not stop the reaction. Instead, it speeds it up and makes the situation completely uncontrollable. Not only that, the reactor did not have a fully sealed protective cover. It was protected only by a concrete structure. Even worse, cooling the reactor with water without using proper coolant was one of the main reasons for the disaster. The most frightening part was that the Soviet Union still had 16 other nuclear power plants with the same design flaw. If those 16 nuclear plants had failed at the same time, it would have been a disaster for all of humanity. Even after Legasov revealed the truth, the Soviet authorities did not take it seriously. No one officially accepted what he said. Finally, on April 26, 1988, after leaving behind a large amount of recorded evidence, Legasov ended his life by suicide. The scientist who saved countless lives had to sacrifice his own life to awaken the Soviet Union. In the end, the Soviet government accepted the design flaws in the nuclear reactors and repaired all of them. However, the damage caused by the Chernobyl disaster was long-lasting. But the heroes who stepped forward during the tragedy, their courage, sacrifice, and dedication will always be remembered.